my twin flame? All right. So this is a question I get a lot. Although I will say the frequency of the question tends to be dying down a little bit, which is good. I'm hoping that the rise of the fucking twin flame movement is behind us, and that it will be on a steady decline until it hits extinction, because no, the answer is a resounding no. He's not your twin flame. Why? Because I don't fucking believe in twin flames. There, I said it. I don't believe in it. And there's so many of you in the spiritual community who believe in fucking twin flames. And I gotta be honest, I don't see any evidence for it, right? The old trope of like, oh, we were one soul and we were forced to split apart and now we have to spend eternity finding each other, but because we're so the same, we repel each other, and there's the runner dynamic and the blah, 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 blah. Listen, this is bullshit. It's fucking bullshit. All it is it is an excuse to justify spiritually the most toxic behavior possible, right? 99 times out of 100, when I see somebody spinning the twin flame trope in defense of their relationship, and I use that term very fucking loosely, relationship, it is because that relationship has turned completely toxic, abusive in many cases, and the woman, most of the time the woman, almost always, I actually can't even off the top of my head think of a single instance where a man has done this. I've seen men fall for the twin flame trope, but they're always the runner. Lucky them, right? They're always the one that gets to act like a piece of shit, while the woman just has to kind of sit there and basically take it in the name of fucking spiritual advancement. It's all bullshit, right? It doesn't even, it doesn't pass my smell test as an attorney, right? And there's also no astrological way to justify it, which for me is kind of my spiritual litmus test, because to date, and again, I'm not trying to put myself out as like some crazy expert. If somebody else has given you, the idea that twin flames are legitimate and you're convinced of it, then by all means, take what resonates and leave the rest. But in my experience, all spiritual things are backed by astrology. All of them. Somehow, and sometimes it takes a while to back into how, to the connection. It's not always easy, but in every case, excuse me, where something has resonated for me on a spiritual level, I have been able to then go back to the drawing board of astrology, and make it, and bring it full circle. And twin flames, I can't do that with. Now, lest you think I am judging you if you have fallen for the twin flame trope, once again, let me tell you, I fell for it, okay? I 1000% fell for it, right? So the timeline of my quote-unquote awakening, if you will, is, I tie it back to about 2012 with the birth of my daughter, who's now 11. And, without getting too personal, she and I have a soul contract, a very intense soul contract, through which, about a year or so after she was born, I woke up one day and basically fucking knew astrology. You don't have to believe me, but that is the honest to God's truth. That's how it happened. I've since had many readers tell me that I brought it in from past lives, and it was, basically she brought it through to me as a reminder when I was ready to receive it. It shattered my world, right? It shattered my entire world view, because up until that time, I was happy working in corporate America, lawyer, 2.3 kids, white picket fence, and from then on, I basically couldn't fucking function in the patriarchy anymore. Fun times. So anyway, I, had all manner of other stuff going on as well. Addiction, alcoholism. And, I met a guy, my marriage was on the rocks, and I fell for the fucking twin flame trope with this motherfucker. And, and it's the same trajectory that I've seen so many other women fall for, where it's just like, the odds were stacked against us, but that only made it more romantic, right? And, he would run and I would chase, and then, it's fucking, all the bullshit, like all the bullshit that comes along with this trope. I fell for it hook, line, and sinker, until ultimately, I woke up and realized like, oh God, I'm like basically fucking up my entire life, right? Now, I have since, in retrospect, I understand now that those lessons were for me, right? They served a purpose, because the very next relationship I got into post-divorce was with somebody who, if I hadn't already bought into the twin flame trope and didn't know that there's only one twin flame, right, I would have assumed that the second guy was actually my twin flame. And I did have those thoughts in the beginning where I was like, well, maybe I was wrong. Like, maybe the first guy was just a, you know, kind of a precursor to like introduce you to the idea of it, and maybe this guy's actually, right? So at that point, that's the red flag in your fucking head, where you're sitting there being like, oh my God, right? Like trying to justify the most errant nonsense, right? And at the end of the day, it goes back to the stuff from the video that I posted a little while back, where like the reality of the situation is that neither one of these guys were that into me, but they were into me enough, right, that they would kind of like hook me into a relationship but not actually commit. And you know, and rather than just knowing my worth and knowing that I'm entitled to a whole ass man who actually cares about me, I used the twin flame trope to justify being, you know, basically being abused and sticking with it, right? I'm not, you know, this is not to put blame on these guys 100%, right? Because it takes two to tango. I 1000% had, you know, my hands weren't clean in this either, right? Because I had codependency issues. And rather than turning the mirror on myself and doing the shadow work, right, the actual fucking spiritual work that these types of relationships are supposed to bring up for you, I just fell back on the twin flame trope and did not at any point in time think it was necessary to look at myself or my own behavior or my own toxicity, right, which was present in, you know, in abundance during that particular phase of my life. So, you know, all this to say, if you've fallen for the twin flame trope, please get yourself out of it, because it's not real, right? It's not real, which doesn't mean that there isn't something going on, because I do see, here's what I've come to learn. And this is where astrology has helped me, but it only took me so far. There's no such thing as twin flames. There are no twin flame markers in a synastry chart. There's no way to determine like, oh yes, this is the person who is like the other part of your soul. It's fucking ridiculous. It's just crazy, right? But what we do have are soul contracts, which I mentioned before with regard to me and my daughter, and I have talked about before. Soul contracts are very, very, very real. And those are extremely visible in an astrology chart. When you compare two charts to each other, you can very easily see whether two people, whether their souls have been traveling together for any length of time. If you have south node connections, right? So your planet or his planet will contact the south node of the other person. This is an indication that this person has been traveling with you for quite some time. However, they have shown up for you in this life as a reminder of what you don't want anymore. Now, the problem with that is that the connection is super fucking magnetic. And it takes a little while before you realize, right before the person starts to exhibit behaviors that you're like, oh, right, I don't want that anymore. And by then, most women have fallen for the fucking twin flame trope, and they're like, oh, no, this is just the runner dynamic. And it's like, no. This is actually like a soul level lesson, right? This is your fucking karma that you chose. This person, you two souls agreed that he was going to do this to you, and you were going to wake up to it and be like, oh, you're right, I don't actually deserve this, and walk the fuck away. In most cases, that's not what happens, but that's what's supposed to happen, right? From a karmic perspective. Contacts to the north node, also very significant. These are soul contracts as well. The difference being that this soul is one that you maybe have been traveling with for a little while, but not as long as the south node. And in any case, they're here to show you where you want to go, right? As opposed to where you've been. Slightly more promising when a romantic relationship has a north node contact, but not, but still a lesson, right? Still a lesson. And when that lesson is learned, the unfortunate reality is that the relationship probably will dissolve, right? I've seen that over and over again, because people get really excited, even people who don't buy into the twin flame trope, when they'll ask like, oh, are there soul contracts? There's this magnetic pull between me and this person. I just know we're supposed to be together. And it's like, okay, cool. Yeah. And then maybe they're right. Like maybe 1000% they have, there is a connection. There's a north node, there's a south node. Maybe there's both. Maybe they go both ways, like across the charts. I've seen it all. But the sad reality is when I see them, I actually kind of get sad for the person, because most of the time those relationships do not go the distance. because a reason, a season, or a lifetime, right? There is a specific reason that you met. There is a contract. There are terms to that contract, which you can see, right? Or which I can read for you, essentially, that, you have to figure out, like, is it North Node or South Node? What is the planetary connection? What house is it in? Taking in connection with all the rest of the stuff that's going on with the synastry. There's a lot to it, but you can see very plainly what it is that you're supposed to teach each other. And then once that lesson is learned, oftentimes the universe will conspire to bring that relationship to a close because you have more lessons to learn, right? Or sometimes the universe will kind of recognize that you're not learning the lesson the way that you were supposed to, and so that relationship will be dissolved, so that you can meet the next person in line to teach you that lesson, because maybe they'll have a better mechanism for getting through to you, right? I've seen it over and over and over again. And it was true in both my cases, right? So both of the guys that I would have, labeled as twin flames, one of which I actually did label as twin flame, he had his Mercury conjunct my North Node. Now that's not even a fucking sexy connection, PS, right? Mercury is not a sex planet, is not a romantic planet, is not in as much as communication is required in relationships, that's Mercury plays in there. But in terms of love, romance, Mercury's got nothing, right? He's nowhere up there. So, there was other stuff going on in the charts that connected me to him on a romantic level, but Mercury wasn't it. And ultimately he was a messenger, right? That's exactly what that contract says. Mercury on somebody's North Node very basically is a messenger. And it was in Libra, right? So it was a message about my marriage and, where I was with it, basically. And that message fucking sucked. It sucked, and it caused a lot of havoc, which I still have to deal with to this very day, on many levels. The next one, I hesitate to even talk about this one, but I had Saturn on his South Node and the Sun on his North Node. You want to talk about a mind fuck, all right? You want to talk about like a soul contract that might as well have come with shackles, right? Like the amount of powerlessness that I suffered throughout the course of that relationship. Positively awful, but it changed my life. It changed my life for the better after I decided that I was fucking done, with the, with buying into the toxicity. I learned about attachment styles. I learned about narcissistic personality disorder. There's a whole bunch of stuff that these contracts can teach us, right? But yeah, so without rambling or getting too personal, there is no such thing as twin flames. I will go on record as saying that it's a bunch of bullshit, and if you've fallen for it, I'm sorry. If you've paid any money towards people to tell you about it, I'm even more sorry. You should get a fucking refund. But all is not lost, because you can sense most people are correct when they think that they've met their twin flame. A lot of times there is that underlying astrological soul contract that can be seen, right? But you have to remain unattached to outcomes with those contracts. That's the most important thing, because like I said, very, very rare that those relationships go the distance. So don't shoot the messenger.